Cowboy Bebop is a 26-episode, 1998 Japanese anime series by Sunrise. It was directed by Shinichiro Watanabe, written by Keiko Nobumoto, character designed by Toshihiro Kawamoto, mechanically designed by Kimitoshi Yamane, with music by Yoko Kanno, collectively billed as Hajime Yatate. Its A-plot revolves around bounty hunters Spike Spiegel and Jet Black as they pick up odd jobs and even odder crew members across the colonized solar system in 2071, even as they are hunted by their various pasts. Until, in the end, Spikes finally catches up with him. In 2020, Netflix acquired the streaming rights and made a live-action series, released in 2021. Despite a great cast and a litter of great scenes, it was plagued by poor fan reactions, both undeserved and genuine, and never quite approached the unique magic of arguably the best anime series of all time. Internet discussions got bogged down in identity-based partisan arguments or nitpicking things that had little bearing on the show's quality. The real problem lay not in Jet's race or Faye's clothing, or even the cowardice of omitting Ed almost entirely. The most perfectly cast live-action anime character ever. Come at me. The real problem was Faye and Spike's casting. This may seem at first blush a strange thing to say, but you see, anime isn't Japanese, and neither is Spike Spiegel. He's Jewish. Cultural appropriation is a strictly Western concept. It's rooted in our separation of race, ethnicity, religion, and government, things that up until the Catholic Church were all one concept. Catholic means universal. In fact, until the American Revolution, all states were ethnostates or ethnically homogeneous colonies of an imperial ethnostate, all having descended from tribes. Chinese people lived in China, had a Chinese religion, and had a Chinese government. Eventually conquered by the Japanese, a people, state, religion, and empire that then subjugated and forced its practices onto the Chinese, erasing theirs, and absorbing some of them. India was Hindustan because its people were Hindus. Much of the Middle East and Africa still resemble this world today. Only in the UK or America can one be a Korean-American Baptist with a Latino child. Without a shared superculture such as this, in which identity is cultivated rather than inherited, ethnic boundaries are nonsensical. Either you were conquered, or you were the conqueror. Since the early 2000s, there's been an open secret in Hollywood, that the West is no longer the target audience. From 2007 to 2020 or so, the focus shifted to China. China, by accruing US debt and trash, had crawled out of poverty. 1 billion people who could now afford luxuries like going to the movies, and an industry threatened by streaming, had little choice but to shift focus. We can invent all sorts of culture war reasons why superheroes, young adult stories, and giant action franchises took off, but in the end, archetypal visual roller coasters lose almost nothing in translation, and can be translated however you want. While adult drama is heavily dependent on geographical perspective and culture. Try watching Law & Order UK when you don't know how their justice system works. Since 2020, partially in light of China's increasingly draconian human rights violations, but mostly because India outpaced China in population, the former Hindustan has become the new nation to pander to in film. This leads to Bollywood films being promoted in the US, but also to US features gathering Indian traits. Musical sequences, full treatments, Indian actors, Muslim characters, and increasingly over-the-top action, if we indeed have anywhere left to stretch that. These elements alienate US viewers to the point of extreme confusion. Who thought this was a good idea, they'll say. A marketing genius who doesn't care what you like anymore. One of the ironies of the Asian focus has been that the Hollywood system has become to China what Chinese manufacturing has been to US retail for years. Another is that, in pandering to the East but not acknowledging it, there's a tightrope being walked culturally as productions try to attract Asian audiences but avoid political hot water in the US from Asian American audiences, all without showing their hand that American viewers no longer really matter. Because to a traditional ethno-state like those in the East, the act of cultural appropriation is a compliment. Eastern cultures like China and Japan consider the adoption by an American of their ethnic culture an admission of superiority or at least equality. Think of culture as a product and public appropriation as product placement. Louis Tan, who played the drunken master in Marvel's Iron Fist, was originally cast as the lead. China does not want to see a Chinese American rediscover his roots, implying American superiority, and that perhaps if you leave China, you'll have the opportunity to reinvent yourself, marry someone not Chinese, and have a child with the privilege of having to rediscover his roots. Chinese immigrant stories are bad for China. China does, however, want to see a white American adopt Chinese culture because it is considered an admonition of Chinese superiority. An American or Englishman emigrating, either literally or psychologically, to China. This is similar to how the history of innovation in rock and roll is largely a conversation between poor England and African America.
Yeah, come on, flat top. He was moving up with me, then come waving goodbye.
In a similar way, a lot of Japanese and US cultures are formed by feeding off one another as we both work through our issues with the atrocities of imperialism, the Holocaust, Nagasaki, and Hiroshima in our own popular cultures. There are genres of our fiction, particularly our visual media, that only exist because of this relationship. Post-apocalyptic dystopias that come from nuclear warfare, for instance, are unique to Japan and the US. In Russia, it's fallout. In Australia, it's resource shortage. Cyberpunk such as Blade Runner is another example. All of anime is another. Manga, much like American comic books, is heavily influenced by films. Not only Japanese works like Akira Kurosawa, but also American films like Blade Runner, film noir, and the works of Walt Disney. The adaptation of Osamu Tezuka's manga, Astro Boy, is usually cited as the first anime. There have been prior animated films, but this is the first to truly carry the mantle. The large eyes and hairline and the aggressively cute aesthetic that would be adapted countless times in every other anime was directly influenced by the works of Walt Disney. The manga's original name was The Mighty Atom, or Iron-Armed Atom. Already in this original conception, there is Japan, America, and World War II wrapped together and screaming off the page, and eventually the screen. In the same way that there is no punk rock without Motown, reggae, dub, and a massive economic downturn in Great Britain, there is no anime without World War II, American animation, and the nuclear bomb. Japan is in the unique position of being both heavily westernized while also remaining an ethno-state. In Tokyo, one sees the future of the West, and in Kyoto, one can still visit the past of the East. The most inimitable special effect of American cinema to a Japanese storyteller is not a CGI dinosaur or spaceship, but the casts. What we take for granted, and in fact what we demand with extreme entitlement, is exactly what no ethno-state cinema can reproduce without great expense. An American film has members of every ethnicity and race, even nationality represented, sometimes to preposterous degrees.
Did I talk about Speed yet, the movie Speed? All right, this will be my last thing. Highly implausible. Highly. Why not just go the whole nine and have, like, Eskimo with a harpoon sitting back there? Indian, full headdress, you know? Shifty-eyed gangster, pinstripe suit, fingering a violin case. Why not?
Obviously, there are plenty of exclusively Japanese anime. Far more than we can ever count, and certainly they outnumber the ones I'll be bringing up. But that's like saying there are more indie films than blockbusters. I'm talking about cultural and most importantly cross-cultural impact. I'm talking specifically about the anime that a Western anime fan would know. When I say anime isn't Japanese, it's because in Japan, it is an anime. It's a movie. Anime is a Japanese borrowed word for animation, and in Japan just means any cartoon, regardless of national origin. Anime as a term for Japanese-made animation is a reborrowed word and a Western term. That specific idea, and the films we as Westerners directly associate with it, isn't ethnically Japanese. Street Fighter, Full Metal Alchemist, Trigun, Ghost in the Shell, Bubblegum Crisis, Dragon Ball, even Evangelion to a certain extent, are all coded multicultural, something Japanese film can only accomplish via animation. This may account for why it has taken off instead of live action there. Certainly Sony Films could be shelling out the same amount of cash to make live action Japanese films as it does a Spider-Man movie, but it wouldn't be worth it. When they do adapt manga or anime to live action, barely any money is spent, and beyond that, there's a glaringly obvious issue: the cast. Yes, I know Spike Spiegel is based on Watanabe and the performance of Yusako Matsuda in Detective Story. Of course, Japanese writers and directors would use primarily Japanese sources. If an American filmmaker makes a samurai picture with a Japanese actor, it does not preclude Clint Eastwood's spaghetti westerns from being the primary influence. Anime is in many ways intentionally nebulous, In a way, the characters resemble the transatlantic accent, a vocal intonation invented by Hollywood to be indecipherable to American and British viewers and sound like both and neither.
Well, would you mind if I sat down?
There's been a lamp burning in the window for you, honey. Here.
Oh, I jumped out that window a long time ago, Walter.
In the same way, characters in many anime and video games are meant to be ciphers that appear both Western and Japanese simultaneously, trans-Pacific, if you will. Something only animation can pull off without using whole casts of mixed people. Once again, something an ethnostate has little access to or interest in. In Watanabe's own words, when creating Cowboy Bebop, I thought it would be more interesting if I added different types of elements together to create something that was completely new. Making Spike a mashup of himself, Matsuda, and an American type is more interesting than simply a Japanese character. Still, there are context clues as to which culture a character or world tips toward if one has to choose, and one does when making live action. While there are plenty of white Ramirez's and Rodriguez's in real life, if we encounter one in a film or TV series, they are 95% more likely to be Hispanic, and we can assume a generic Irish, English, or Italian background for white Americans. French last names are mostly reserved for people from New Orleans or Canada, and German and Polish last names more often than not denoting a Jewish character rather than a German or Polish character. Similarly, in an anime, if we are dealing with a Takagi, we are probably looking at an ethnically Japanese character. Bateau is slightly ambiguous in that it is both a Japanese and Lebanese surname, and this could be on purpose to be both recognizable to the core audience while suggesting something broader. Jet Black, Spike Spiegel, Ed, and Faye Valentine are American-coded names. Black and Valentine are generically Anglo-Saxon surnames, implying white American or British heritages. Spiegel, however, is ethnically German, and while it could simply mean Spike was a German-American ethnically, in the Americana blues and cowboy-themed bebop, it is more likely his mop of hair so curly it could be called a Jufro is indicative of his actual background. This could all be coincidence, and the names simply flare on ultimately Japanese characters, but another known influence on bebop was Lupin III, an anime based on the adventures of the grandson of a French thief and master of disguise. The use of non-Japanese ethnicities to enhance the work's Lupin qualities is not out of the realm of possibility. Then there is Spike Jonze. Spike, a Jewish film and music video director, was by 1997, during bebop's development, if not the best or most well-known music video director, certainly the most creative and sought after. Even if you knew none of his filmography or videography, you knew one work, the Beastie Boys' Sabotage, a crime epic whose attitude, postmodern sensibility, humor, and pathos eerily match the tonal qualities of bebop. Spike's real name? Adam Spiegel. Ultimately, my point is not about Spike's ethnicity, or even animes, but merely that both are larger than you think. And when I see casting that doesn't seem to get that, or arguments about appropriation and adaptations that preserve the underlying approach of the entire genre, it tells me someone doesn't actually get it as much as they think they do. I knew One Piece would be good because it cast its brown lead with a brown actor and didn't paint a Japanese kid. Skinheads were originally ska and reggae fans who worked on and lived near the English docks in the 70s and 80s. White kids who also liked the music and the people who made it shaved their heads and wore the same clothes in solidarity. White supremacists co-opted the look afterward, forcing the black and white reggae fans to make a choice. Quit being a skinhead, disempowering your union, or stay one and appear like your own opposite, a racist. This is what they do to ally cultures. Whenever an alliance has been formed, they show up in its clothes to sully the act. The history of this move is the history of blacks and their friends ceding the territory permanently. But in this, we can see the simple question we should ask ourselves to help tell the difference. Is this solidarity, or is it gentrification? Making these delineations based on identity or politically based shortcuts never works. It ends up just doing the job of white supremacy in the name of combating it. It isolates the underprivileged classes from their more empowered allies and maintains the status quo, simply through the colonization of symbols. Separate is not equal. Likewise, turnabout is fair play, but the novelty will wear off if it is only enjoyed spitefully. Genuine participation in the conversation of a diverse culture, not only out of love, but out of the desire to expose, promote, protect and uplift those you imitate, in other words. Enriches both cultures. Culture is a conversation. It can be hard to discern when something is taking its first steps to colonizing a culture it's fetishized and ousting its originators, versus dancing with another culture in good faith. It is paramount we learn the difference, however, because just as much as with the former, in the absence of the latter, cultures die. Steal it like a local and hire the people who inspired you. Share the wealth. And when they come to colonize it, and they will, do not retreat. Stand your ground and say no. You move.